Hi everyone, I'm Laura Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, here with another one of our conversations at home. And I'm really thrilled today to be joined by Tom Pelphrey, who's an incredibly talented actor and is appearing in the upcoming season 3 of OZARK, playing Laura Linney's brother Ben in a really, really wonderful performance. I've been really blown away watching it. So thank you for joining us today, Tom. How is everything going for you on the current quarantine?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Mara. It's nice to be here. Yeah, it's just a lot of time inside, a lot of cooking, a lot of reading, cleaning, which is something I don't usually do as much of. But yeah, obviously it's been a big adjustment, but luckily for me, I'm healthy and the people I know are healthy, so it's it's been okay.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, and I hope that it stays that way for you and everyone around you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. I wanted to jump into talking about Ozark since the episodes are coming out and hopefully lots of people will be watching them while we're all at home. It's some much needed escapism. Since the show has become something that's so well known and so highly regarded and revered at this point, is that something that you allowed yourself to think about or acknowledge stepping into it? Or how did that change the way that you were coming in season 3 versus the beginning of the show?
Yeah, well, I was a fan of the show before I ever auditioned, so it was just one of those shows that I watched on my own. I really loved it. I was kind of obsessed with the show. I think I started watching it like a week or so after season 2 was available. So I kind of got to binge the first 2 seasons and just really loved the show. I was impressed by the writing, the world of the show. And so, yeah, when they asked me to audition, I was pretty excited.
When you got the role in the show, did you find yourself going back to any of the episodes and just kind of looking at any of the specific detail? Because even down to the fact that there's a moment in season 2 where Laura Linney talks very briefly about your character, who obviously now we get to know a lot more about him.
Yeah, there was a few people who pointed out the references that were made to Ben in the first 2 seasons. So yes, I remembered them because it hadn't been that long since I'd watched the show. But yes, yeah, there are some references to Ben before I show up.
Yeah, and since fortunately Ozark is a show that obviously has a full series order at a time, did you have the scripts for the full season when you signed on to know what his entire arc was going to be to figure out how you were going to play that?
No, I didn't have the scripts for the whole season, but something that did happen that is very rare, which was very much appreciated, was before I started filming anything, Chris Mundy, who's the showrunner for Ozark, called me and told me everything that would happen for the entire season. I hadn't even asked. And I hadn't asked because you just get so used to not being able to have access to that information. So Chris Mundy's also an incredibly kind human being, but it really set a nice tone for, aside from Ozark being a great show, it's also a really special place to work. And that was one of my first introductions to being treated very well, by the showrunner, reaching out and understanding what an actor has to do to prepare, and that it's helpful to kind of know ahead of time where you need to end up. And so he just offered up the whole season to me, which was incredibly helpful for me to kind of have it in my mind, so that you can keep it in mind when you're working.
Yeah. Did that conversation with him change anything in the way that you were thinking about your performance and the way that you wanted to play Ben once you had all that information at hand?
Yeah, well, one of the nice things I think about knowing the entire arc of the story is, part of what your job as an actor is, I think, is to understand and sort of shape how you're getting from A to Z. And sometimes when you don't have that information, you can be a bit more tentative and you kind of have to respond and make choices in the moment. And it could be that by the time that you get to the end of what you're doing, and this is specific to television, because obviously in a movie and a play, we have the whole script, but you could find yourself in a TV show where you get to the final few episodes and you go, oh my God, if I'd have known that this is where we're ending, I wouldn't have done that in the beginning. Or like, if I'd have known that this was the thing, then I would have done that differently. So yeah, I think it's helpful, but also objectively and logically, I think it is better for everyone if everyone has that information. I understand why a lot of people don't like to do it, but it was very cool that Chris did and the way he did. And so, yeah, super helpful, because you have an idea of where it's going, and then you can kind of pace things out and understand, give it a shape. And yeah.
Yeah, it makes it sound like he has a really good idea of what it is that an actor needs to step into a role and to really create an environment for that, for the best version of that performance that he can get out of someone. And obviously there's different directors coming in and out on each episode. So what are some of the things that Chris did on set in terms of once you were in production and shooting to really create that overall atmosphere and environment for everybody?
Yeah, well, that set is a very, very, very special place. As I said to Chris and Jason Bateman multiple times, and Laura Linney, that they've ruined me for life. You know, that is a very special job. And I think that is a direct result of Jason and Chris and Laura. You know, the atmosphere on that level comes from the top, and just talking to some of the crew members. Most of the crew is the same crew that started in season 1. So they're in season 3. And I overhear them talking on the weekends, you know, after we spend every day, all day working together. They're making plans on the weekends to hang out. And I'm like, what's going on here? Why do you guys all like each other this much? Like, don't you want to not see each other for a day at least? But no, everyone loved each other, and they were so respectful, everybody respecting each other's process. And again, that to me is a direct result of the way Jason handles himself, the way that Chris handles himself, the way that Laura handles herself. Like, it set a tone of, we're here to work, we're all going to be professionals, but no one's going to yell, we're not going to have any drama, we're going to respect each other, it's going to be calm, and while we're here we might as well have fun. It's a very I don't think that happened by accident, though. I think that was specifically curated by, you know, you think about someone like Jason, who's been on set since he was a boy. Doesn't surprise me that he would understand the value of like a really healthy work environment. And aside from it being enjoyable to work in that kind of environment, for me personally, I think it allows a feeling of safety that does allow for actors to do their best work. And maybe there's situations where that's different, but that's the way I felt.
That sounds like an amazing experience for everybody involved, and I love it. In terms of all the different directors coming in and doing each episode, did they all have the same process for time that you would have to rehearse or figure out a scene on set, or does that vary person to person?
Yeah, it does vary person to person. Everybody kind of has their own way of working, which can also be kind of exciting, you know. But like, yeah, I mean, you know, because Jason directed the first 2 episodes, so like with someone like Jason, who, you know, the whole thing is just in his bones because he's acting in it and executive, you know, he just lives it. So you can see the ease at which he understands the storytelling and the ease at which he can orchestrate what he needs to have happen in a way that you're aware of a sort of really smart bird's eye view. And then some of the directors want to get in and discover, and other, you know, sometimes like Alex Sakharov, he directed the last 4 episodes, and he's this beautiful Russian, you know, and we'll sit and talk, and he's very poetic and beautiful and soft. And so yeah, there's many different ways, I suppose, and all of our directors were pretty great.
Yeah. What's the unique thing about being directed by someone like Jason Bateman? Because you have that shared language and commonality of both being actors and him really understanding what he's asking from you at any moment.
Yeah, well, it is a rare treat. I mean, when you're in the hands of someone that you know is that talented, and you've seen the proof of their talent time and time again, and that is the person who you're trusting to sort of take care of you and your performance, it creates a feeling of safety and trust that I think allows for your best work. And he's also a very nice man. He's he is what you would hope he would be. And so, yeah, it's really cool. And it's also really impressive, for me as an actor. I was talking with him one day, and it was an episode that he was directing. So we were in the house and there were people outside, and he went outside and gave everyone notes based on what he was watching on the iPad for a scene he was in, and then came back inside, and he had to start the scene walking out with his dialogue. I come out later, and he's directing everything. He's thinking about what he needs to do as an actor, and then turns to me and starts telling me jokes. And then they say action, and he goes out and does it all. And I'm like, that is an insane level of focus. And I never saw him get ruffled once. That is such an impressive ability to be in control of many things simultaneously and stay calm and stay friendly. And yeah, I guess I keep harping on this, but it was a really special place to work and a really great environment.
Yeah. I was also interested because obviously you're coming in season 3, and so different to when you're doing a movie or when you're doing a theater production together and you're all figuring out everyone's working style, how everybody likes to approach their craft as an actor together. You're really coming in differently and assimilating to how it's already existing. So how did that differ for you?
Yeah, it differed in a really great way because right off the bat, I get to meet Laura Linney, and I'm playing her brother, and I've been a fan of Laura Linney since I can remember. One of the first Broadway shows I saw was Laura doing Sight Unseen. I've seen all of her movies, the TV shows, so I have a real respect and admiration for her. And then to meet her again, it's like the things I was saying about Jason. She's so kind, so present, and we really started talking about our relationship and the way in which she works. And she is meticulous. She has a work ethic, maybe the best work ethic I've ever encountered in terms of her preparation and the way she's thinking about things. And so that was a really, I guess what I'm saying is seeing the way she was being, and I already feel like I work pretty hard and come prepared, but seeing the level to which she was preparing, I was like, I literally said, can you show me how you're working? And she was very generous and said, be in my place Sunday morning at 10. And she literally sat me down with materials. We had the scripts, and she showed me literally how she is working. And I loved it. I love getting an insight into somebody else's process, especially obviously somebody that I admire. And I thought it was extremely generous of her to spend her Sunday morning sharing that with me. And so, yeah, I excitedly gave over to her way of working, which felt, one, like a good idea in general, and two, it made me feel even closer with Laura, which is also useful for the work we're trying to do.
Yeah. What were some of those specific elements that you took away from that process and then assimilated into your own?
Yeah, just a level of one, she's reading the script every day, so just a level of repetitive contact with the material. I don't want to give away any secrets, but the main point, and she even said this, one of the main points of that way of working is, if you're going to work all these different ways, the one thing that it will force you to do is come into contact with the script over and over and over again, which is a very smart thing to do, regardless of how it's going to be different on the day or what the director's thinking, the script is the bones of the thing. And the more familiar you can be with the script, and the more insight and creativity that can come to you from reading the script, I think is, in my experience, never been a bad thing. So one of the main features of the way Laura works, I think, is a way to keep yourself engaged and interested in constantly going over the script in different ways, so it never gets boring or stale, but you're constantly just going over the material, and then you really have a sense of ownership.
And in terms of putting together kind of any sort of research and backstory amongst your two characters, because there's this entire storied history between the two of them, literally for their entire lives, that we're not seeing on screen, but you're bringing that into your performance. What were some of the important conversations that the two of you had together to decide what that backstory and that history was going to be with each other?
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't talk too much about backstory. We talked a little bit about where we thought we came from in terms of like how we grew up, how much money we might have had, and the kind of relationship we would have had when we were together. And it was really interesting to listen to her thoughts on that. And there wasn't a thing she thought that I didn't think was a really great idea. And then something that, again, happened quite naturally in terms of like, what of this is tangible? Because, you know, sometimes you talk about things and it can be really useful and it can inform you and it help you make decisions. There's other times you talk about things, it's not going to be useful. But one of the most useful things about, in particular, my relationship with Laura, I felt, was just the feeling I have of respect and admiration and just a real love for her, which is in the right energy for Ben and Wendy, you know? And so to be able to lean into what I was already coming with, you know, was like a nice, I guess, bonus. But again, that is something that I know that Laura was cultivating and curating, and she was very generous and open with me. And again, another version of making me feel very welcome. You know, like you said, you're going in on season 3 and it's rightfully so a little bit like being invited to someone else's home, you know, like they've done this amazing show for 2 years. They've built this, they put in all this work and effort, and like you get to come and play at their house. And so you know, want to show up in the right way. And the way they welcome you, Laura, Jason, everybody, like made me feel like I had been there from the beginning. Which is, yeah, pretty great.
I was also interested in hearing a little bit more about your very first scene in the show, because it's very explosive. It's incredibly, you know, there's a lot of emotion riding through your character. And I feel like I learned so much about his state of mind just from 60 seconds of seeing you on screen for the very first time. And how much did that first scene in the script inform what you then understood about this character overall and the way that you were going to play him throughout the season?
Well, you've given me another softball for me to gush, but the writing is incredible. The writing on that show is incredible. I mean, I thought the writing was incredible, everything I'd watched before I got on the show. And in my humble opinion, they might have outdone themselves in season 3. The writers are incredible. I mean, like you said, the script, seeing that gave you information about the character, but I felt the same way reading it. You know, you read the first scene, I'm like, oh, this is this is basically, this kind of tells you this guy. Like it gives you the range, a bit of the parameters, like it really sets you up in the right way. And that's the thing with the writing on that show is incredible. Like that's the way you want storytelling to be, because it's informative and it gives you the information that you need to enjoy the arc and the whole, and it's entertaining at the same time. So yeah, that first scene was great. That was an episode that Jason directed. He was really great. You know, that was early days, so I felt very welcome and comfortable. But yeah, I mean, it is the level of the writing on the show is another thing that really makes it a very special job, because, you know, there's times where writing is okay and you have to work to try and make it a little bit better, or try and fill in the blanks, or, you know, try and figure things out. And, you know, sometimes the writing is really good and it just seems to be self-evident what to do with it. And then the thing becomes to just kind of make sure you're getting out of the way. You know, it's like, if I can just let this feel how it feels when I'm reading it on the page, then we'll be okay. Like, this is really good. So yeah, I thought that first scene with Ben was really smart, like a really smart way to set up the character and kind of funny.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most memorable character introductions I've seen in anything in a while.
Yeah, and that's so cool too, because you're like, oh man, I get to come on this show and this is my first scene. Like,
One of the other things that the show approaches through your character, Ben, is also the idea of mental health, because he's bipolar and he's obviously been on and off his medications over the years at various points. So what was some of the research you did into the details of how that would affect him at different points, and figuring out how you wanted to play it as a result?
Yeah, well, I read a book, and the name escapes me right now, but I read a book. It was written by a psychiatrist who, I think the book was written in the late 70s, but it was a female psychiatrist, and I think psychiatrist is the right word, but anyway, she was studying medicine and had bipolar without being diagnosed. So she started to notice her behavioral changes and didn't know what was going on, and she was studying bipolar. Like, her field of study was mental health, so she was studying all of these things, and it was happening to her and she didn't realize it, and it took a colleague of hers, or a few colleagues of hers, to sort of tell. But anyway, I thought this book was such an incredible source of information, because you simultaneously had a memoir, like a sort of journal, and she was very honest about her experience as someone with bipolar disorder. Simultaneously, she's a doctor who understands all of the science of it and understands what's going on, and so you're getting the information about, like, literally what's happening in the body, the phases, the different possible outcomes, because it can affect each person differently, and then depending on your diet, obviously, depending on whether you're taking lithium or another kind of medication, like, all of those things are influencing what bipolar might look like from the outside. Exercise, sleep, alcohol, all of these things, which were things that I can't believe I can't remember the name of that book now. But that book was extremely, extremely helpful. I mean, underlining, highlighting, because then when I went into the script, like, anytime there's a scene where we're drinking, it's like, okay, remember that that's how the alcohol is affected. And then it's like, when am I on medication? So yeah, can't remember the name of the book, but it was extremely helpful.
It also seems like there must be a balance between the fact that, this is part of a character that you're playing and it's part of the storyline in a very dramatic show, but obviously you still want to make sure that you're balancing it and playing it in a very emotionally respectful way to people who are dealing with this every day in their lives, and through people in their family and friendship circles that they know. So how did you think about that from your perspective?
I never thought about it in terms of being respectful in how that word is landing on me. I thought about it in terms of, as always, to try and be as honest as possible, because I feel like ultimately it would be disrespectful to try and shade anything in a way, whereas maybe the most respectful thing, or maybe the most respectful thing to do, and not saying that you can ever really achieve this at all, but is to try and be as honest as possible, because then perhaps it can show people that it's very difficult, and maybe not always nice and hard, and can take a toll. So yeah, I never thought about it in terms of being respectful, but I did think about it in terms of, I have a real responsibility here to try and do this as honestly as I think I can. Who knows how that turns out, but
No, I absolutely think that that's how you captured it from what I've seen in the show. So I think one of the really interesting things that Ben does as a character and that you do with your performances, that he's able to break down walls that exist. And I think we particularly see that through his relationship with Julia Garner's character, with Ruth, who's had very necessary defense mechanisms, and he kind of seems to be the first one to really be able to break through those. So, but that also is an element that comes through from the way that you're performing it in a scene with her. You have to do that through your role in it as an actor. So how did you think about approaching that?
Well, you also kind of have this cool storytelling opportunity where you have this crazy wild world that is so insane, you know, like everything that happens in Ozark is so crazy. And now you have an opportunity to bring in a new character who gets to see what's happening. And so, like, from just a storytelling point of view, it's like, what would it be like to walk into that, you know? And then what would it be like to know about the way Ruth has been treated? And for me, it just seemed obviously that you would think, Jesus, this poor girl. It just seems like that just keeps horrible things keep happening. And so yeah, I thought they did a great job of writing that. And also I think that there's I loved working with Julia, and I think that there's something about Ben and Ruth that both of those characters sort of appreciate a kind of honesty above all else, and I think that that's a part of why they bond so well, you know. Plus I think that Ben probably thinks Ruth is very funny.
I was also interested because I think every single project that you do as an actor requires you to develop different skills and to take a performance to somewhere that maybe you haven't had to for another character. What were some of those new things or new skills or new places that you had to go to through playing Ben that you hadn't experienced before?
Yeah, well, it became really helpful that Laura had showed me how she works on the scripts, because one of the skills that was important to have was we were very fortunate to be able to shoot the last 4 episodes as one block. And one block just means like we're kind of shooting all 4 episodes at the same time, and we have the same director, which is the really cool part of it. But that does mean that you have to keep a lot of things in mind simultaneously, you know, like this happens here and then this happened. Oh, wait, what happened here? This is episode 7 today, and then 9 later this afternoon. What happened in between? You know, all of those things. So some of it was just a matter of being disciplined with, being disciplined with the preparation, so that you literally were keeping a good track of what had happened before, where you're coming from, where you're going, you know, all those things. And in a lot of other ways, this was a very easy job, because, I mean, when the writing is that good, it does feel like you get excited to go to work. And then when you couple that with a great cast and the crew is all happy to be there because it's a nice place to work, that's why I kept telling Jason and Chris that they ruined me for life. I was like, I know enough to know this does not happen very often.
I'm so glad that this is the experience that you've had on the show. I also, given that we're currently in a situation where a lot of productions have shut down, obviously casting offices have closed down, as someone who has gone through the audition process, I was interested if, in terms of self-taping, there's anything that you found to be really useful in terms of how you like to put together those auditions for yourself.
Yeah, I kind of played around with a few different things over the years. I really do like self-taping. If I can do it, I like it. You have a bit more time. Also, you can take time in between. Sometimes that's not luxuries you have in a casting office. Other times you want to be in the casting office because obviously the thing you're not getting at home is any kind of notes or guidance. But one thing I realized recently was that I'd been doing all these tapes in front of a white wall, and I finally did a tape in front of like a dark blue wall, and it was really different. It looked so much better. So, I mean, I think with self-tapes, it's different for different people, but like just on the technical aspect side of it, you can buy a cheap tripod, right? And you can set up your iPhone on it. All the iPhones now, the last few anyway, all have video that's good enough to use to self-tape. So you don't need to go out and buy a camera. You can even use your computer. But yeah, so it's cool because you have access to the things you would need to make a good self-tape now, and it's not gonna be too expensive, and chances are you already have an iPhone. So you could buy a cheap tripod for the iPhone, buy a light, buy like a ring light that costs you like $50, $75 or whatever. And some of those ring lights you can adjust like the color temperature to go from like daylight to tungsten. So depending on how you like that you look, you can kind of adjust that. And then yeah, I didn't realize how much being in front of the white wall was affecting like the light balance on the video on the cameras. So like a darker color, like a blue or something like that, allows the camera to see it all differently. I think it looks better. And I guess it's not surprising that most professional casting offices have blue walls. So maybe it's a bit obvious, but yeah.
I think that's all such amazing advice, and really, really appreciate you taking the time to welcome us into your home and talk today and share your experience, not just working on Ozark, but also overall your process as an actor. It's been really interesting, and I hope that everyone watching this will watch the new season of Ozark, because your performance is just so astounding and really memorable in that. So congratulations.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, everybody. Stay safe, stay social distancing, and thank you to all of our medical workers.